it be? For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Before I get today's show started, I wanted to say, did you see that Scott Turner got a job with the Vegas Raiders? Going to be part of their passing game, probably more like their passing game coordinator. He's not going to be the offensive coordinator because their head coach, Josh McDaniels, calls the plays. So, again, that would have been a token offensive coordinator position. So he lands on his feet somewhere. Good for him. I got no ill will towards him. He stunk here, period. End of discussion. But we'll see what the future holds for Scott Turner. He's now in Vegas with the Raiders. Wanted to react to the comments that you guys left. Posed a question to you last week, or earlier this week rather. What was the biggest what the F moment of the 2022 season for the Washington Commanders for you? And I think you can put it into two different categories: off the field, on the field, because I think there were a number in both spaces. So I have one for each, and I'm going to read your comments. And when you guys, because I feel like you're going to hit on both of mine, because you guys see it pretty much through the same lens that I do. So I'm assuming you're going to hit on both of mine at some point. And when you do, I'll tell you. So I'm going to go through these. And I'm just going to say this. I know we're going to hear benching Heineke in favor of Wentz a bunch of times. And so I'm not going to elaborate on that a bunch of times. I may do it once, and then we'll just keep going as people say that, because that was a big what the F moment for a lot of people. So I know I'm going to see that already. And so I'm just acknowledging that out of the gate. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start off with Thomas Massey, who writes, "My biggest what the F moment was how unprepared they were for the second Giants game. After 2 weeks to prepare, the media tours during the bye week, the ticket giveaways, like in Revenge of the Nerds, shit, we forgot to practice." The season ended that night. Thomas, that is a great one. You're not lying about how you felt going into that bye week. I wasn't displeased with the tie, but I wasn't happy about it either. But everything that they were doing, that entire week leading up to the week of practice, they were supposed to be focused. We've got all this time to prepare for them, now. And, to see the way that they came out was so disappointing. I was amped for that game. We talked about how big of a game that was. And this is the biggest game at FedEx Field since, you probably got to go back to 2012, and the season finale versus Dallas. Like, this was a massive game in the regular season, and they screwed the pooch. Really disappointing. And so, yeah, that's a really good one, Thomas, for sure. Ryan A. writes, "My biggest what the F moment was when the news came out about Dan actually preparing to sell the team. That trumps everything." That is my off this field what the F moment. And to your point, that trumps everything. If you're looking at one what the F, most people are thinking on the field, which that's why I think it's two categories. But if you're thinking about what the F, like, this is something we thought that would never happen. For us longtime fans that have been with this team, 25, 30 plus years rooting for this team, and seeing how Dan has run this thing systematically into the ground, we thought this day would never come, or we may not be able to, outlast him. Some people thought, I'll never see this team rise again or be under new management and have a chance to get back to a semblance of what they once were, because as long as Dan is here, that's impossible. And when we heard that he was, Bank of America was getting involved, and, he was checking to see, if he could sell this thing and how much he could get, I could not believe it. It was the biggest and to me, you take 25 million steps to get to the next what the F moment. Dan reportedly selling or preparing to sell, the biggest news of the season by far and away. No game trumps that information. So that's a huge one, Ryan. I couldn't agree with you more. So that's my off the field one. Now, on the field, we'll talk about that when we get there. Mike Lowry writes, "Biggest what the F moment for me was Carson throwing that interception on his first pass versus the Browns, and subsequently Ron keeping him out there." It wasn't the first interception that did it for me, even though that was pretty damn bad. Um, it was the second one and Ron keeping him in. When you heard the chants of Heineke even louder. You heard it after the first interception, but after the second one, I mean, you couldn't ignore that. You know, it was like a crescendo. And Ron just stuck with his guy, and then he had that. I told you the worst thing that happened in that game was that 21 play, 97-yard drive, marathon of a drive that ended in the Carson Wentz quarterback sneak stretch for the touchdown, because it gave Ron false confidence and hope. I think it gave all of us that, because even after he did that, I wasn't sure if we were going to take over the game, but in my heart of hearts, I wanted to believe, okay, the Browns are sorry and they're going to lay down now, and the direct opposite happened. He should have benched him after the second one. If not the first one, to your point, definitely the second one. That was the one where I said he should be out of the game right now. Told my dad, he was sitting there watching the game with me, get him out now, get him out now. That didn't happen, obviously. Leo Blakeney, thank you for the comment, who writes, my biggest individual what the F moment was Taylor's 2 fumbles against the Giants, which truly lost us the game. One gave them a touchdown, the other cost us at least 3 points. Yeah, those were some very costly fumbles. Just that game overall, having the success on the ground with Brian Robinson and not feeding him, getting all the way down there and not punching it in, i.e. the Titans game all over again. Having the pass interference not be called, Taylor Heineke almost throwing a pick like the play before or whatever, or the first play down there. It was just insane. That entire game was just frustrating. You get the big Jahan catch, and you're thinking that's going to be the spark that maybe turns this into the Indianapolis game all over again. I think it might have been 17-12 at that moment of that. It might have been 20-12 already at the moment of the Jahan catch. So you're thinking we're going to at least get a field goal out of this, but we should get a touchdown and try to tie this thing up. And to screw the pooch the way that we did, him fumble that football, us get back down there again, and then not get in the end zone. Yes, that game, all of that game was so frustrating. King of the North writes, my positive what the F was finding out the bullet that went through B-Rob's knee missed all the tendons, ligaments, and bones. That's a miracle in my opinion. That's one of the off-the-field ones that you look at and say, that went from tragedy to, oh my God, how did that possibly happen? Like, that's almost physically impossible. That defies all science. Like, it's supposed to hit something and it didn't. That in itself is a miracle. Thomas Covell writes, my biggest what the F moment was coming out so slow against Cleveland, a game I went to. Starting Carson Wentz and not benching him after 2 picks, and then not knowing we could be eliminated from playoff contention. At the end, that explains everything. Yeah, well, that's a good one, Thomas. I mean, coming out slow against Cleveland is a surprise, because that's who we are. That's who we've been under Ron Rivera all 3 years. Slow starts to games, slow starts to seasons, et cetera, et cetera. So after the Giants game, nothing surprised me in terms of slow starts. But not benching Carson after the second pick was like, what are you doing, dude? Are you trying to lose this game? Seriously, do you want to lose? Do you not want to make the playoffs? And then him not knowing was the icing on the cake. It was like literally the cherry on top. Like, you couldn't be more clueless if you tried in that situation if you're Ron Rivera. That was a really bad look for him. From an optics standpoint, it doesn't get much worse than that entire day for Ron Rivera. Starting Wentz, not pulling him after the second pick, losing the game in the fashion that you did, and then not knowing that you could be eliminated after the game was finished. Like, it's just a total brain fart on the part of Ron Rivera. And then not handling it. It's one thing to not know, and it's okay if he didn't know, right? You're not supposed to let us know that you didn't know. That reporter asked you that question, you go, look, all I was focused on was winning this game. I had no idea, what could happen, because we weren't supposed to be in this position. We were supposed to win this game. And I think everybody would have taken that for what it was. Anyway, Mark David writes, this one is pretty easy for me. I actually have 2. The first I would say is the first half of the Jags game. The way the offense looked was amazing. Not just the production, but the formations, the motions. Just the complexity of it seemed astonishing at the time. I've watched that game back multiple times, and I always say, what the F happened to that offense? It looked to have the potential to be great. The second was the benching of Taylor for Carson. The move came at the worst time and provided no spark. If you wanted to bench Taylor for a spark, then put the rookie in. That 1 week would have made that much of a difference in his production. What the F, Ronald? Great comment from Mark David there. I don't think anybody really takes into consideration how good we looked against Jacksonville in that first half. I mean, that's the part that really bothered me with Scott the remainder of the year is like so many things he did in that Jags game worked, and he never went back to it. And I've talked about it several times, the diamond formation, the usage of Curtis Samuel in certain situations, and, how we were, Curtis, some of the routes and combinations Curtis was running, and, Antonio Gibson running the corner route out of the backfield, and, the ways we got guys the football, we didn't do those things. I remember the running joke with me was the tight end screen with Amani Rodgers that we ran in that game. He got like 30 yards. And we didn't see the tight end screen for like maybe 10 weeks. It was ridiculous. Like, Scott Turner was a joke. In that first game, everything that I thought this offense could be, specifically in the first half, but really that entire game after the third quarter debacle, we come back and we score in the fourth quarter and rally and win. That offense looked like everything I thought it could be. Remember, I was talking crazy. I was like, we're going to score 30 or 6 times this year. After that game, I was convinced I was right. Couldn't have been more wrong. So I'm right there with you, Mark. And then, again, you're going to hear benching Taylor benching Taylor for Carson a trillion times. So, Wilfredo Elias, thank you for the comment, who writes, biggest what the F moment had to be the game-winning touchdown to Dotson in week 1. I really thought this was going to be a great year after that because that stuff never happens in our favor. I think after the game, my direct quote, and I could be wrong here, but tell me that this doesn't feel different. Some things don't age very well. I think I very specifically remember me saying, this feels different, guys. This feels different. Oh boy, was it ever. Samuel Hatley writes, tying the first game against the Giants, we had multiple opportunities to win and couldn't get it done. If we win that game, I'm almost 100% sure we win that second game, and the season changes dramatically. If we win that first game, then we're making it to the playoffs. That's essentially how it went. All we needed to do was beat the Giants once. If we beat the Giants one time, first of all, you're probably right. We probably beat them the second time because the Giants were struggling. We beat them. That would have probably been their 4th loss in a row. Then they go and get mopped the next week versus Philadelphia, come off of that beating, and you go back to Washington. Their season might have been done. That tie kind of saved them. And then them beating us resuscitated their season. They were drowning. The tie was simply someone diving in and grabbing them. They still weren't responsive because they got steamrolled the next week at home versus Philadelphia. So they were still laying there motionless. And then, our game was CPR that revived them and brought them back to life. Melham79 writes, I'd say it's the loss to Cleveland. I get losing to the Niners on Christmas Eve, but losing a winnable game to the Browns, inexcusable. I was so disappointed with that particular performance. And again, every opportunity to bench Carson Wentz throughout that game, and Ron made up every stupid excuse. Oh, well, we thought we were going to have to throw in the second half. Who gives a shit? What do you think? We thought we were going to have to throw the ball down the field. Okay, and so what? You want Carson throwing into triple coverage like he did and throwing picks? What difference does it make? Get Heineke in the game. Pigger Glue writes, biggest what the F moments were when he almost fake cried defending Carson and when he didn't know we were going to be eliminated. That he was more pissed off about the Jimmy Garoppolo report than actually, defending Carson. I think it was more about the fact that that's a slap in the face to Carson, and we just didn't need that at the time. But it is what it is. You wanted Jimmy Garoppolo over Carson Wentz. It is what it is. And yeah, he definitely got super pissed. And then not knowing we could be eliminated was just a terrible look. B. Smitty writes, the no call at the end of the Giants game comes close. I know I dropped a what the F bomb after that one, but I lost my mind when B-Rob was trotting out for the biggest fourth down of the season. They sent him back to the sideline only to proceed to get shut down like a blockbuster video. What the F? I don't understand in that Browns game how we talked all week long about the lack of touches for him. Going all the way back to the Giants game where he was dominating. You have the struggles against the 49ers on that fourth down, the fourth and goal or whatever. And we still are complaining about B-Rob not getting enough opportunities in those. And he's running to go into the game, and they send him back into the sideline and do a toss to Jonathan Williams. I mean, are you effing kidding me? Whose idea was that? That guy needed to be fired immediately. Assuming it was Scott Turner. Cookie Girl. My biggest what the F moment was when Ron decided to start Wentz in the Cleveland game and then have the audacity to keep him in after multiple picks. Still upset. I think that speaks to everyone's emotions in that particular situation. Didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense now. Probably is even a worse decision in hindsight. But in the moment, I think most of us felt like, get him out of there. What are you doing? Get his ass out of there. Terrible. Frankie Yo writes, the biggest what the F moments for me. One was the compensation we gave up for Wentz. I want to be clear and say I didn't hate getting Wentz at the time, but you have an owner that is publicly blaming Wentz for everything and a GM trying his hardest to get rid of him, and we give up multiple picks and move back in the second round while taking on the entire contract. Mirror this to the Baker situation. Pretty similar, but the Panthers only gave up a conditional pick, and the Browns paid 2/3 of his contracts for the year. Never made sense to me how the Colts managed to work us like that. Number two, the John Ridgeway powerbomb in the Houston game. While awesome, I remember vividly laughing while saying, what the F? This man thinks it's the WWE. I remember that very vividly. It was hilarious, but at the time I was like, bro, it's a penalty. What are you doing? And, he was all hype, and the rest of the team was looking at him like, bro, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, seriously, you can't do that. The entire Vikings game could be on here. The TH4 spin move on Kendrick sending him to the shadow realm. The refs running into Bynum on the TH4 yeet TD, excuse me, TD throw. TJ Hawkinson coming in and balling after only being with the team for 3 days. John Ridgeway icing the game with the personal foul on the long snapper. You're not lying about the Vikings game. That was a big, just a compilation of what the Fs. The Ridgeway powerbomb was just, it was crazy. The only reason it was funny is because we were killing the Texans. If that was a close game, I would have lost my shit. And then the first one, that was, to me, in the moment, I remember saying this, I don't have a problem with the move. I have a problem with what they gave up. They got hosed because the Colts were going to have to cut him. And I said, the only way to justify it is that if Wentz had options, and I'm not sure he would have. This was the thing. If Wentz had options, then he may not have chosen Washington. And maybe they thought he wasn't going to choose them in free agency when he got cut. Or you could have stalled out the Indianapolis Colts to the point where, like you said, the Baker Mayfield was that's what we should have been giving up. I felt that in the moment. And when Baker Mayfield was finally traded to Carolina, I said, that's the kind of compensation we should have been surrendering to the Colts, not what we ultimately gave up, especially knowing that we have to take on the contract. We're doing you a solid, pretty much. You're not doing us one. You can't stand the guy. You can't wait to get rid of him. And you have this nasty contract on your hands that you don't want any parts of. We're doing you a solid. I'm not giving you 2 picks and moving back in the second round. Are you crazy? That was always my biggest issue with the deal. Not that we traded for him. I didn't love the deal, but I didn't hate it. But I hated what we gave up. Ethan Dykes writes, the best what the F moment, Derek Forrest absolutely blowing up Travis Etienne, gave me a lot of hope for the season. Worst what the F moment, Wentz interception against the Titans at the goal line, destroyed a lot of hope for the season. The interception against the Titans is my biggest what the F moment of the season. When Terry drew the pass interference down to the 2, there was no way in my mind I thought we were going to lose that game at that point. We are going to score this touchdown. We are going to win. and Wentz tried to throw a pick on every single one of those throws. Specifically first down, where you're like, bro, what are you doing? If you're going to throw it away, throw it away. What are you doing? The guy caught it, but he ended up out of bounds. Like, what are you doing? The lack of creativity, not getting to specific matchups. Like Scott Turner, that was foreshadowing what was to come the remainder of the season in the red zone. He was awful in that sequence of plays, and he only got progressively worse as the season moved on. But Wentz throwing that pick on third down, I literally put my hand on my head and stood there in disbelief for probably 2 minutes before getting ready for the show. Literally, I went from, let's go, hyping up my wife, and she's getting ready to get the kids upstairs because she knows I'm about to have to go live, and just knowing we're going to win this game. All the emotions of that game were crazy. The Diami bombs and, Tennessee having a bomb of their own and retaking the lead that quick after we finally took the lead. The defense looking dominant that day, but giving up some stuff when they didn't need to. But ultimately, you've got an opportunity to now win the game. And I remember Ron wasting a timeout on a stupid challenge on a Cam Sims catch that we all clearly knew they weren't going to overturn. And not having that timeout at the end, coupled with a couple of clock blunders in that game, really pissed me off. But still having an opportunity to win, I would have overlooked all of that. We would have talked about it, but I would have been able to say, you know what? We won. Fix this shit, but fix it knowing that we won. And to lose in that fashion, remember how I came on after that game? I was emotional. I don't get emotional. I was Carl Thomas after that game. Very emotional. That was definitely my biggest what the F moment of the season, for sure. Desmond Williams writes, my biggest what the F moment was again Cleveland when Carson threw 2 picks and then proceeds to be left in the game. Really embarrassing moment this year. And Cam Curl, I'd love to see a contract done with the emergence of Defoe. There is no need to overpay to keep him around. The Carson thing is definitely going to be, that Cleveland game is going to be a point of contention for most of you. Street Camo writes, biggest what the F moment was not being able to beat the Giants after preparing for them for 3 weeks. We got hold on some calls in the first game. We really should have won the second game. Was shocking. We looked unprepared, which showed we didn't have the proper coaching staff here. That game is why Scott was fired. What was the game plan for game number 2? Also, where was the RPO plays for Heineke? Why didn't we use his legs, which was his most dangerous weapon? There's a lot there to unpack. I'll just say this. Not beating the Giants the second time around, I was so confident. We should have beat them the first time. We dominated that game. I talked about it for an entire week and a half, how we dominated the Giants the first game, and we had a tie to show for it. And I was convinced we were going to destroy them. And you knew my theory. Scott Turner's got, 3 weeks to prepare for them. 2 really. But anytime he's got extra time, you saw what he did to Jacksonville. You already know what's going down. Yeah, right. That was me giving way too much credit to Scott Turner. GBT Rat writes, biggest what the F moment was the media insisting Sam Howell wasn't ready and shouldn't play, only to look like idiots in week 18. I don't remember the media insisting that he wasn't ready. That's what people do when they were there at practice in the summer, and he probably wasn't ready. I've already said this. If Sam Howell had been inserted into the lineup in week 7 after the Bears game, had we lost and dropped to 1-5 on the season, I don't know if he looks as good as he did against Dallas. I don't think he would have been ready yet. I think the full season of watching Carson and Taylor Heineke prepare and getting those reps, mentally watching them go through the offense, I think it prepared him for the Week 18 performance we saw against Dallas. I do think that sitting that entire season did help him a ton. And I think if you asked him, he would tell you. Obviously, he would love to play, but I think he would tell you that was some invaluable experience. Baron Von Monkey writes, the what the F moment has got to be Carson throwing the pick versus the Titans in the red zone. That's mine. Number 1, ding, ding, ding. It's got to be. I mean, you can't lose that game, man. To me, the entire season changed on that because think about it. We could have gotten on that win streak sooner, had more confidence sooner. Who knows what happens against Chicago? Maybe we, don't beat the Bears. I don't know, but that one stung, man. That one stung. First and 10. My what the F moment was the Carson Wentz incomplete pass against the Browns and eliminates us out of the playoffs. By that time, you should have known we already lost the game. We weren't going to the playoffs. So that's hard for me to believe. Maybe you just kept having hope, like he was going to somehow put a rabbit out of his hat, but he's not Heineke, right? He's not going to pull out some ridiculous, come from behind victory. Dylan Zipperer writes, both Giants games for me. I was at the second one, and that one was rough. No one in the stadium was aware of how bad the missed PI was until we got outside because they never showed a replay on the Jumbotron, which is a disgrace. If you're at home, you should be showing that thing a million times to rile up your fans. They never did. So if that's the case, shame on them, but I wouldn't expect anything less from this organization. They don't get it. Jose Martin writes, my biggest what the F moments was not being able to beat beatable teams like the Giants, Browns, and the Titans, Browns, and Giants twice. Those teams are saying, hey, we should have beat Washington. They suck. So it goes both ways. Titans, that's the kind of team we were, though. You could beat anybody, you could lose to anybody. We weren't good enough. That's the difference between good teams in this league and subpar teams. Is good teams beat the teams they're supposed to, and they beat a couple of teams that are on their level or maybe even better than them. Subpar teams or teams that have capability but are subpar play down to the level of competition, play up to their level of competition. So they're capable of beating anybody, but they're also capable of losing to anybody, and that's what we are. Similar to Dallas. Abel Ambrosio writes, the what the F moment was Carson throwing the pick versus the Titans in the red zone. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Future Millionaire writes, biggest what the F moment was the play calling most of the season. That's like 1A, 1B for me. 1B is we stopped feeding B-Rob against the Giants. Not taking out Wentz cost us the playoffs. The B-Rob not being fed the football in that second Giants game is still mind-boggling to me. It's rare you see a guy averaging that kind of yardage and not getting the football. It's insane. Mr. Ron B writes, Herm Edwards famously said, you play to win the game. Hello? To me, the biggest what the F moment of the season, 2022 season, without a doubt, was Rivera settling for a 20-20 tie with the Giants. Think about the 2-week empty feeling after that game, only to follow it up with a lackluster home performance against the same New York Giants team on Sunday Night Football. We didn't lose the game, but we damn sure didn't win it either. October 19th, 2020, Rivera's first season as head coach, made a comment following a loss to, ironically, the Giants when we went for two late in the game for the win, not a tie. The only way to learn how to win is to play to win. The course of the season changed after that game, all because Rivera settled. He settled for a tie, a less than satisfying tie. What the F? Hello? That's a good one, Mr. Ron B. And that you've seen that throughout Ron's tenure, and I try to cut him a break with anything that was said in 2020 because he was going through cancer. But there's a lot of contradiction with Ron, and you hear it. You go back and he'll say something that he said in the past, and then he'll say something now because he's looking for sympathy or he's trying to justify something, and it doesn't jive with what he said in the past. Like, judge me on wins and losses. He said that in the past, and then he said, hey, success isn't just wins and losses. What? You just told me that you judge me on wins and losses. Judge my success on wins and losses. Well, now we're asking you to do that, and you're telling me that this season was a success despite not winning enough games to go to the playoffs. That you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. That's a great example of that right there, Mr. Ron B. Raymond Jaquette writes, biggest what the F moment was Ronald's decision to go back to Carson Wentz instead of sticking with Taylor Heineke for the Cleveland game. Cam's dad must not want him to play for us. Somewhere between 65 and 70 mil should be good for Cam. I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. He says until he can make impactful plays like Derwin James, he doesn't get 80. Sean Knight writes, my biggest what the F moment definitely was when I realized Ron Rivera's limited success as a head coach came with a young, healthy Cam Newton under center. No Superman, no success. So that's an off the field thing when you finally had the light bulb go on and you say, he can't win without a big time quarterback, which is why he's been trying so desperately to get one. Um, Atlas013 writes, I like Ron for our organization. My what the F moment was Carson Wentz getting the start against the Browns and keeping him in after all the picks. Heineke wins that game and possibly changes our future. If we make a playoff berth, mostly all is forgiven with Ron. QB search continues with Ron spearheading. As far as Ron golfing, I don't mind it. He has a job as a head coach, but that doesn't mean it encompasses his life. Still able to do things outside of football. And people saying he should be planning during the offseason. The man literally was coaching games with cancer. Sheesh. Let him golf. Agreed. D. Moore says, my biggest what the F moment is when I look at our record and our standing in the NFC East and I saw the Giants being the better team with better record than us. Daniel Jones is no world beater and we ran out and got Carson Wentz for this. So that was an off the field what the F there. Anthony T. writes, the biggest what the F moment had to be the name they chose over the fan favorites, i.e. Red Wolves, i.e. Warriors, etc. And let me add, they screwed up by trying to keep the name reveal a surprise. There's still people not really, still people upset about the name. The name is what it is for me, but I can't tell anybody how to feel about that. But trying to keep it a secret and a surprise was hilarious because they did a horrible job with that, which jives with everything they've done, from this organization, from London Flector to the, Sean Taylor, picture near the porta potty, the statue that they have in the state, like all of that shit. It's just poorly done. It's what they do. Sean Blake to, giving us Sean Taylor, day, 3 days, giving us notice like 3 days before the game or whatever. It's stupid. Sean Blake says, these are several what the F moments. 1, Snyder selling the team. What the F, obviously. 2, Rivera not being prepared for the 2 Giants games and approaching them so cautiously. What the F? Yep. Number 3, Ron not knowing we could be eliminated from the playoffs. What the F? Clearly that was crazy. 4, Scott Turner play calling awareness / third down red zone calls. With the F? Yep. 5, consistently letting our TE3 block their best edge rusher. I don't understand that. Just kills me. How many sacks we gave up this season doing that was ridiculous. Over and over and over again. Yeah. Heineke refusing to use his legs more. That was something that escaped me in terms of making it make sense. I just couldn't find the reason why I kept doing that. Reading Ron's teams were down 3 scores in the first half 9 times in his Washington coaching career. What the F? I've talked about that. It's insane. It's an insane stat. I mean, it speaks to his ineptitude, the slow starts that we always complain about, not just in seasons, but in games. There's a lot fundamentally wrong with that. And that's a fireable offense in itself. To be down that big in the first half of games, you could easily fire him just off the strength of that alone. Amar 2 times official writes, my 2 biggest what the F moments were opening up Twitter and finding out about B-Rob after the Ravens preseason game. Definitely one there. And second, that's an off the field one though. He says, and second, not only did Ron go back to shitty Wentz, he let the man finish the game. No way in hell he should have gotten the opportunity to play all 4 quarters. Couldn't agree with you more on that. Derek B says, my top 5 what the F. Number 1, B-Rob getting shot. I think everybody kind of lost their mind when that happened. Eagles week 3 blowout. Didn't see that coming. Not after the second half we had against the Lions, even though the first half against the Lions wasn't very good. It might have been a precursor to what was coming. Taylor's, pick 6 versus the Packers. He said he was at the game. Number 4, the tie versus the Giants. And number 5, Wentz versus the Browns. That Packers game was just weird because Taylor had the pick 6. He had the fumble to scoop and score that was negated by the penalty. And then the second half, he was outstanding. I remember me and Derek B going back and forth about Taylor's performance against the Packers because it was literally a tale of 2 halves. He was terrible in the first half. He even admitted he was nervous after the game in the first half. And then he got his shit together. And he actually played really well in the second half. Solomon Ali writes, going back to Wentz while they still controlled their own destiny in Week 17 versus the Browns. Absolutely. D-Man Cart writes, Ronald's biggest mistake was, oh, that was the biggest mistake comment. King of the North writes, it's the two New York games. I was fuming at Ron for not going for the win and settling for that tie. I knew deep down inside that we needed to win that game in New York. Then to see us come out after the bye, flat and unprepared for a team that we had 3 weeks to prep for, was truly a what the F moment. After we couldn't beat the Giants, I knew the season was finished. It was hard to understand what the F happened to our season. Before those Giants game, I was saying Ron's playing again. Then things just fell apart. I think we were both. There was so much Ron's plan, coming back around. It was like a boomerang. It was coming back around finally. And all the goodwill he had built up on winning 6 out of 7, he systematically undid all of that goodwill in a 3-week stretch, playing the same team twice in a row. It's amazing. Robert Hernandez writes, my biggest what the F moment was absolutely choking away that Titans game. That's heartbreaking for me. Alante Etheridge writes, Rivera screwing up a playoff opportunity versus San Francisco. We had a chance to win that game, but we weren't the better team. That one didn't really move me at all. I expected to lose that game. Armando Vargas writes, biggest what the F moment is beating an undefeated Philadelphia Eagles team in prime time. Absolutely. That one is pretty high on the list. If you're going positives, who saw that shit coming? I didn't. I thought we could compete with them. I thought that we could make them work. I did not expect us to not only go in there and win, but win in the manner that we did. We beat them up physically. We picked them off. We turned them over. We ran it down their throats. We converted in the red zone. We had big plays. All of the shit that we had to do was a perfect storm, and everything came together in one night, and boy, was it beautiful to watch. Brian Horst writes, I will give you a good and a bad moment. Good, the win versus the Eagles, which is what Armando just brought up. And my bad, the game against the Giants and Browns. There was so much hope going into that game, and then after, it was gone. Fat Mike writes, my what the F moment was Ron putting Wentz back in week 17. We've heard that probably more than any other comment. Mike G2 writes, 4-way tie. Number 1, B-Rob tragedy. Number 2, pick versus Titans. Number 3, both Giants games. Number 4, starting Wentz versus the Browns. Those are all good ones. Redskins Review writes, biggest what the F moment? That should be absolutely clear to everyone. Benching Taylor Heineke. Redskins Review is one of the biggest Taylor Heineke fans that you will find out there. So that one makes a ton of sense. But benching Heineke was a mistake, obviously in hindsight. I didn't have a problem with the benching. I had a problem with them not going back to Heineke. He should have been warming up in the bullpen right after the first throw of the game. Heineke should have been warming up in the bullpen, and as soon as he threw that second pick, all right, Heineke, you're up. Diego Barco, right? Biggest what the F obviously was trading for Carson. But besides that, the Jahan Dotson catch and spin against the Giants, definitely I was like, what the F, we actually hit on a receiver in the draft. Baby Tanner Jr., Tanner Moss Jr. That was a hell of a spin. That whole drive was like a pseudo what the F, because it was 4th and 4 and Heineke does that, Heineke magic shit. And then, we get down the field and then Jahan puts a vicious spin on a guy, gets in the end zone. And I'm thinking we're going to win the game at that point. But as we all know, that did not happen. Jarrett Taylor, the loss to the Browns. Definitely, to be precise, it was 4th and 1. B-Rob had been falling for 4 yards easy all game. Scott Turner calls some kind of BS sweep. Turns out to be a 3-yard loss. Browns take over, shaking my damn head. That was the play where B-Rob was going back to the huddle, was called back to the sidelines, and they run a toss with Jonathan Williams. And they tried to block Myles Garrett with the tight end, or with Curtis Samuel, excuse me. That went well. Good job, Scott. Demand Cart writes, the way Ronald coached the Lions, Titans, and Browns games, I have no trust. He has to go. So yeah, that wasn't really a comment that I needed to read anyway. Let's see. Rich writes, the biggest what the F moment was drafting for Darian Mathis. It still baffles me to this day. Why are you taking a defensive tackle who wasn't all that great in college in the second round when you already have 2 starters? On top of that, you reached for him and had other holes to address, yet you reach on a guy who is drafted to be a backup. Even if you want to say they were drafting for when Payne leaves, why? Why draft this guy in the second round and keep Duran while uncertain if you're going to re-sign him or not? Just trade Duran at that point. And if you say we needed depth at defensive tackle, I agree, but you don't take depth in the second round, especially at a position like defensive tackle. It was a bad defensive tackle draft. That's number one in their defense. And they felt like after Fedarian Mathis, this was going to be a steep drop-off at that particular position, so they went and got him. I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't love it. Remember, in the moment I told you guys, I did not love the Fedarian Mathis pick, and then we didn't get to see him. And I had seen flashes of what he could be. You're like, okay, he's going to be a problem inside, but stopping the run in particular. But we didn't get to see him. He got hurt in the first week of the season against Jacksonville. So hard to justify it now because we haven't seen him. We may learn that this guy's really good and he's a problem up front and may turn out to be a really good player for us. But at the moment, I told you I wasn't thrilled with the pick. There were other things that I thought we could have done with that pick. Delonte Alexander. The biggest what the F moment, tied 2020. Curtis Samuel runs for 21 yards in the Giants' territory. Why did we proceed to start calling plays like we were in field goal range? To make matters worse, I bet in correct score 23-20 and 17-20. Missed out like a stack. I was pissed about the game and my bet. Yeah, that sequence of plays, we actually went backwards after that. I thought we were going to win the game at that point. I thought we were going to win the game. When Curtis rips off that big run into Giants territory, Scott gets super conservative, and we start doing dumb shit, and we ended up going backwards and having to punt. Just Scott Turner, boy. Just looking back at some of the decisions he made, it cripples you. You can't win with some of the decisions that he made, and that's why we missed the playoffs. So Ninja X writes, the biggest what the F moment that I can never forgive is the Curtis Samuel third and short halfback dive. Easily one of the dumbest plays I've ever seen, and I forget the other really dumb play we had one back in the day. Maybe swinging gate was the two consecutive fake field goals against the Giants, but that third and short halfback dive to Curtis Samuel out of the gun. Are you kidding me? When you got Brian Robinson? What? I told you, like, some of the decisions, when you look back at them throughout the course, like, were you trying to make sure that we lost the game, Scott Turner? Like, were you really a double agent? Because there were some decisions where you look back and you say, bro, how could you possibly make that decision with a straight face? Like, seriously, you had to be laughing like, oh, I'm going to kill him with this one. Like, they'll never know. They'll never see Curtis Samuel getting a handoff on 3rd and 3. Like, what are you doing? I just assumed they were going for it on 4th down. You do something stupid like that, you got to be going for it on 4th down. Then we punted. What? What? Jay Willard writes, I will give you one positive and one negative. What the F moment from 2021. Well, the positive note is the low-hanging fruit. It was the way this team went into Philly and took down a full strength, for the most part, Eagles team when they were flying high. And for the negative, the what the F moment was the final game of the season and how these young guys were balling and why we didn't see them earlier in the season. My examples, of course, are Sam Howell, but Khaleke Hudson and Percy Butler and hell, even D. Johnson and a few more all out there balling. Don't forget about Patua Ia, the defensive tackle, balling their asses off. And we could have used that hell even 1 week earlier, if not earlier in the season, because Hudson playing that way next to Jamin would have been awesome to see. And Butler being able to get out and help with that speed on the back end and blitzing would have had us in the playoffs 100%. We needed that youthful energy at those positions, and we had Bostic and Mayo, and that didn't fit what we needed. But keep in mind, Khaleke Hudson got in because Jamin Davis didn't play. So I don't know if he could play the other linebacker positions or not, but it was fun to watch those youngins get out there and run around and make some stuff happen. You know, we'll see what happens in the future. KC writes 4th and 9. 4th and 9 against the Giants, converting that first down. Like, are you kidding me? They went for it. First of all, they had the balls to go for it. We bitched up on like a 4th and 6, 4th and 4, 4th and 6 in Giants territory. And they go 4th and 9 and say, F it, go for it and get it. Unreal. Kevin, the PRF, left me a War and Peace novel. I'll read it briefly. Says biggest what the F moment, Sunday night football game versus the Giants. Biggest moment of the Ron era, and the team came up small. And the what the F had to do with the team having the same issue dating back to the 2020 games. A team hiding their weakness, nullifying our strengths, while simultaneously exploiting our weaknesses and playing up to their strengths. How many times have we had to deal with, oh, they're double teaming our formidable defensive line? Guess we got nothing to do but hope our seven holds up. Our back seven holds up, excuse me. Or if our D-line gets pressure, no problem. We'll just hit them with a quick pass and move the ball. I can remember us having this issue dating back to the Bengals game in 20 that Burrow got hurt. And meanwhile, on offense, just the opposite. 7-step drop killed, getting our QB killed this week. Don't worry. Won't happen on the next drive. Next week, the next QB, no compensation for our weakness, playing as if we had none. And the Giants game was such a what the F because we had 2 weeks to prepare for a team we had just played and nothing. Same week coaching with time to prepare. What the F? And that is the perfect way to end this show with that comment there. It was so disappointing. There were so many to choose from. And you guys highlighted just about everyone. I don't think you missed a single thing. The good, the Jacksonville first half, the good, the Eagles game, there were some good in there, right? But there were a ton of bad what the F moments. The good, Daniel Snyder, looking to sell the team. But there were so many, and with this team, it's so often the bad far outweigh the good, and that's, again, what happened in 2022. I thank you guys for your participation. Looking forward to doing more of these as we continue to push forward towards the start of the new league year, looking back on 2022 before we turn the page and start focusing in on 2023. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the command post. You know what it is. Post up, take command. Until next time, you guys have a good one. God bless. Take care.
LouieTeeNetwork.